record anyway,
God.
and when we're ready, we'll just go because
So I don't have to do anything.
You just need to talk, basically.
And sit there and be pretty.
That's why.
Still too much.
That's why if this system works, it's so much more of a relief for us all, really. But yeah. Anyway, right. We'll start, I suppose, now then. Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 52nd Everybody Dice podcast, where today I completely forgot what we're talking about in our main topic. Our big topic is, would you ever consider making an Everybody Dice board game? More on that later.
The specific word for that is moron.
But yeah, you may notice something's changed here. Yes, we're trying something a little bit different. If you're watching the version on YouTube, we've actually got a bit of a more professional look here. So by all means, if you're listening over on SoundCloud, go over to our YouTube channel and you can catch some of this on there. But anyway, it's a podcast about board gaming and tabletop gaming in general. I am Steve, and today I am joined by... You don't know.
Daryl.
Here. Oh, okay, it's not what.
But you are pointing at me on my screen.
Yeah, you're down there. It doesn't matter. Daryl.
I'm everywhere.
To me, you're pointing into the abyss.
Hello.
Yeah, there we go. So, and who is in the abyss?
Am I in the abyss?
I guess so.
Hello.
Yeah,
I'm
you
Ian. On my screen, it's the complete opposite, and you're just pointing at nothing.
Yeah. Oh man, that didn't work out quite as well as I wanted. Teething issues.
Can I be the first to note that Daryl looks like he's in a room made for giants? You're just like a little boy staring up at all the...
Get out!
Oh dear. I almost feel like we
I would
could
love
use
right
a
now
green
if like a
screen
hand just came down.
I was going to say, if we could just green screen
That would be really
Daryl
funny.
somehow and just take a snapshot of him and we'll a snapshot of his background and we'll just make it bigger and bigger over every single week so he looks increasingly smaller and smaller.
Just shrinking me.
But anyway, what have we been
I
doing?
could probably do that on one of the other ones. I could.
But what have we been doing recently? Well, we have our Fort review that went up the other day. I was quite happy with that one, actually.
Yes.
I thought it went quite well. But that one's on the website. I did promise on the last podcast as well, we were looking at possibly streaming some stuff on Twitch as well. That may happen sometime soon, but I don't want to promise anything right now. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, keep an eye on our Twitter at Everybody Dice, and we'll announce something on there, and possibly maybe on our Facebook page as well, facebook.com/Everybody Dice. God, I'm getting all the shilling in early here. Hey, look, we have our Patreon details there as well. By all means, go over and have a look there.
Yes, and smash the like button and subscribe.
It's like we're proper YouTubers. Oh man.
I still don't know if I prefer when someone says it at the end of the content, because I've been watching quite a lot lately where they say it at the end, but I'm at the end because it's interesting content. But I don't know if it puts me off when someone goes, "Hey guys, I just want you to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and if I get to 100k followers, I'm going to do a live unreading or something." And you'd be like, "All right, okay."
I'm
gonna probably not watch you now.
It completely puts me off, and sometimes I don't do it when people say that. I'm a grown-ass man, and I make my own decisions. I don't need to be told when I enjoyed something.
I will like what I want to like.
Yeah.
I like doing all the stuff at the end of the video because I don't know.
People can turn off.
Yeah, exactly. I just felt as if everything actually worked in quite nicely there. So there we go. Okay, how are you guys anyway?
Got a week off. That's good.
I've got a week off as well.
And at the moment, I have every week off.
I was talking to my boss about my week off, and I was moving like some heavy stuff around. He was like, "Oh, don't put your back out before your week off." I get home, I'm home for 1 day, and I jump out at my wife and I put my back out. So it's gonna spend my entire week off sat down playing Red Dead. I would have thought.
Nice.
Maybe doing. I got some clones.
would you have I was going to say, would you have had it any other way?
No, it's just harder for me. It's harder for me to go for a slash when I need the toilet. That's
Yeah,
my
yes,
main
okay.
complaint is that if I want to go up and go get a drink or something, it's like as I slowly whine as I get up.
Oh, God.
Okay, anyway. Shall we move on to what we've been playing?
Yes.
Okay, so, um,
Yes.
okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is Sagrada. I played this the other day with my parents. It was my birthday, and we celebrated
Hey.
by playing Sagrada. And boy, do we take a lot for granted as board gamers in terms of what we actually understand in terms of like board game lingo and stuff like that. Because my God, I picked a game that plays very, very simply, but the scoring is a little harder to follow, and that is where everything went wrong, basically, because it turns out that come the end of the game, I think my mum hadn't been going for one thing because she understood it working a different way. My dad, throughout the entire game, was unsure how the scoring was working and was wondering whether he was doing everything right. I was going through it very, very slowly. But really, to give you some concept as to how simpler a game this is, it's a dice drafting game. So the idea is everyone is trying to build a stained glass window. So you've got these like clear plastic dice that kind of represent different colours of panes on your window. It's a really nice looking game, really, really nice. And everyone has these cards that slip into their player board, and that tells you how you have to build your window. So it might be there are certain spaces where you can only put dice of a certain number in. There may be some where you can only put dice of a certain colour in, and then there are gaps in between that you can fill in with whatever. The caveat being that you cannot put two dice of the same colour next to one another, and you cannot put two dice with the same number next to one another adjacently. But diagonally, you can put whatever you want in there. So straight away, terms like orthogonal would just go over their heads. So in the scoring, where it would say any amount of dice placed orthogonically this way or something like that, they just, although I would explain it means the dice is next to it but not diagonally, and yet that still would not sink in. And I mean, we've all played a lot of board games, so we can understand that quite simply, but where they don't play board games, it was just way over their heads.
I had an image of it being simpler than this. I had an image of you saying like move your meeple and then being like trying to figure out what part of their body is a meeple and like adjusting a part of their body to in turn to
but that was a struggle, but as such, Sagrada is a really, really neat game. I think I've talked about playing the digital version before. This is the first time I've played the physical version. So the idea is you can actually manipulate some of the dice. So the idea is you draw as many dice from a bag, as many as there are players plus one. So in a 3-player game, you would draw 2 dice for every person, would be 6, and then an extra 1 would make it 7. The reason for that is because you go around the table once, drafting a dice each, starting with the player that's currently the first player, but then it comes back around the second time round in reverse order, so anti-clockwise, which means basically the person who draws the last dice first draws the first dice second, so they get to draw 2 dice in a row. So as such, that's where the difficulty kind of gets balanced out a little bit. And yeah, then you're just basically trying to fill your window pane. Basically, you're trying to make a full pane there. You're also trying to satisfy the scoring options, which are there throughout the entire game, which are usually things like have a different coloured dice in every single slot down each column, and you score for each column like that, or it might do the same thing for rows. You also have a private scoring objective, which is usually a bit simpler, luckily, actually. So it would be like the sum of all the values of the yellow dice that you've got on your board. Every board that you get a selection of 4 different card faces that you can slide into your player board at the beginning of the game, and the more difficult ones offer you more tokens that you can use on tools to be able to manipulate the dice and perhaps change them if nothing is working for you. So really, yeah, it's a spatial puzzle. You're drafting dice. Um, like I said, the actual gameplay side of it was simple enough that my parents played it without too many problems. The problem was
Right.
understanding the scoring. So it was just a really interesting kind of view into just because a game is simple doesn't mean it's still going to go down well if the scoring is complicated. Because sometimes all you think about is this game is really simple to play. It isn't necessarily simple to understand how you win the game, and that's something that sometimes I don't think about. And it's certainly something I'm going to take forward from there with Sagrada. So, yeah, either way, that is Sagrada. I mean, have either of you guys seen this game before? It's one of the more. This is my attempt as well to.
Don't think I have.
Yeah,
I think you have explained it to me at one point.
yeah.
I think you have spoken to me about a game where you build the windows.
Yeah.
So it's not familiar, but I do recognise what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting game. It's in the I spoke about on the last podcast about how I wanted to play more games in the top end of the Board Game Geek. I said like top 200 was where I was looking at trying to play more games in there, and Sagrada is one of the games that's in there. I can completely see why. Really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it from the digital version. It transferred brilliantly across to actually having the physical version as well. Great games. I would say they're worth checking out. Before we move on to something that we can all talk about as well, I want to talk about Under Falling Skies, which I'm briefly going to talk about because this is one of our Patreon reviews that is coming up. Probably going to be released towards the end of March. But Under Falling Skies, man, I wanted to talk about it now simply because I know this game is hard to get hold of at the moment. I think it is probably the best solo game available on the market right now, and I wanted to mention that now simply because people are looking for single-player games at the moment with lockdown still happening and stuff like that, so I kind of felt like I wanted to get this out there now. It's kind of like, to really briefly explain it, it is kind of Space Invaders meets XCOM. So the idea is you have
that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, you have flying saucers at the top of the board, and they're slowly going to move their way down the board over the course of the game.
Right. Yeah.
You have down the bottom a base that you have to build out, and then you have to use the various facilities within that base to wipe out or delay the UFOs coming down, because when they hit the bottom layer, they cause damage to your city. But you're also trying to develop your research, because you can't destroy the mothership unless your research track is at its very fullest.
Very XCOM.
Yeah, so you're really having to balance between how many UFOs you're going to let in and how much you're going to defend the city to how much you're advancing your research track, because you only have 5 dice that are rolled that you can use for every turn. And the other downside to that is, although the dice you roll with higher numbers will be more useful for your rooms and will make your rooms more powerful, they will also make the UFOs that are on that column descend more quickly. It's a very difficult game. I'll get into it a bit more in my review. It even feels like, even if you're playing on the very easiest mode, I was still finding, although I would consistently win in the easy mode, even then it would only be by the skin of my teeth. So, yeah, it's an interesting game. Like I say, I'll get more in depth to it when we do our review. But if you are looking for a really good single-player game for the time being, I would totally recommend going out and buying Under Falling Skies now. I realise this contradicts our review a little, sorry, it damages our review a little bit here, but I feel like the review could be out a bit too late, possibly. So yeah, just from our review schedule, basically. But yeah, that's Under Falling Skies.
Get out there, get it.
So next up, we have we had another Zoom night recently. I know, Ian, you weren't around for it, but I feel like you can still contribute because we played one of the games that we'd played before anyway. So we talked about it on the last podcast, but we played a lot of Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. We got 3 games out of it. I maintained this game is brilliant. If anything, I feel like the games we had just cemented it even more.
Did you
Absolutely love it.
did you manage to get a go as not being the person who gives the clues?
Yeah, we figured out a system. So everyone
Yeah.
else took a turn being the forensic expert on the last time we played, and I sat as an investigator. I still haven't been a murderer though. Out of all the games we played, I was
Ian.
not the murderer once.
Hang on. What? Hang on. Why was I being targeted there?
Do you remember Mysterium and the frustration?
Right.
How of a madman I am when my clues link to each other.
Yeah, I was furious. I just thought you were being awful, but it turns out the game decided to make it vague.
Good job. Good job. You probably weren't part of this one because I chose Phil as my murderer, and the options were Phil had stuff like he had a really murder heavy scenario. He had like a pistol, sniper rifle. Can't remember the last one, but he also had blender, and then he had like weird options. He had weird options. So Phil went for blender, and his other thing was insect. Right now, in my mind, I'm like, right, okay, and then because of the options it gives you as like the events and stuff like that, it wasn't like trace left at the scene. It wasn't anything like that to start off with. It was location, which I put kitchen because of blender.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I can't remember what else. Oh yeah, it was age, sex, and something else. I think it was on the three of them. So I put grandpa, man, and perverted. Yeah. So he's a perverted older man in the kitchen. That's all they had, right?
So,
and they were just like, oh god, it was so funny.
I was gonna say, I felt like over the 3 games that we played of it, the only person that was consistent over the 3 games was Andy. Between me, Daryl, and Phil, all of us completely beefed it at some point during it.
Yeah.
And in Daryl's case, Daryl's one was he gave us absolutely no information as to what the clue item would be. So me and Andy, when we made our accusations at the end, both of us knew it was blender because we had plenty to suggest it was blender, and it wasn't going to be anyone else. But we had nothing on the clue at all. So in other words,
did you not hedge your bets then?
Well, we had 4 clues on there, and we figured because it was in the kitchen, I think we picked broom. One of us picked broom and blender, and I've forgotten what the other person said. The other person said blender and something else that was mildly kitchen related because we had nothing,
but not the bug.
We had nothing else to go on. It was literally just a stab in the dark as to what the clue was.
Is that Daryl's fault though? Because it doesn't sound like Daryl's fault.
So it turns out it sort of was.
So like one of the things is one of the things that you'd have to say is that as the forensic scientist, one of your things is that if the other players are focusing on one thing too much, to take that off the table and replace it with something else. Daryl went hard on the perverted aspect of it, which has nothing to do with anything. So basically, me and Andy were looking at that and going, what the hell is perverted?
The reasoning.
Why are you so obsessed with the idea that somebody likes insects being perverted? Why are you making that assumption?
Because it was a blender. Because he had blender and insect. Wait, hold on. And there was nothing else in the second column that suggested that those would link together. So apparently, I thought originally when we played it, Steve was reading off like a preset scenario when he told the story, but it turns out he's actually making it up on the fly. So I made up a story in my head involving a blender and an insect, and I was going under the kind of almost like Silence of the Lambs kind of style, where they find the insect in the mouth kind of thing.
Right.
But unfortunately, no evidence section came up, so I'd already just set on that and was like, well, I'll just keep perverted because it's kind of. And it turns out that in the mind of Phil, his scenario was he blended up the insect.
Sure.
And then poisoned the person with it. And I was like, all right, okay, that makes way more sense. But at the same time, I wasn't going anywhere near that.
That makes more sense than some guy using a blender to kill someone and then jerking off while an insect watches. Like,
Never said that. Never said that. I said that he left an insect. That's what I was hoping. The insect would be the left part, but it never popped up.
but what part of that is
What's
perverted?
suggested there. So when you play it, the clue is meant to be something else that was found on the scene that's suspicious.
Mm.
So the insect was definitely found on the scene and was a suspicious item. I mean, just to move away from that game here for a second, Daryl did make up for it though, because the round when Daryl was the murderer, he did incredibly well. He picked items that did not
Here we
discount. It didn't discount any of us, and this is really.
May
how
I
the
say my
murderer has
items
to
the
play when they
second?
pick. So, I won't explain what it
my
was. I'll
items
leave
were the
that to
best.
Daryl. But essentially, what Daryl did was he picked an item as the murder weapon that didn't discount any of us, any of the three of us. I was flimsy with my one, but between Phil and Daryl's characters, you couldn't tell between them. And what was even better was the clue he picked as well was also something that linked both he and Phil to it. And it ended up working out brilliantly for him, and essentially it left me at the end of it to really struggle. It was a crapshoot between the two.
You guys at one point very early on guessed the murder weapon. Guessed the murder thing, and then you kind of went off, which was great.
I guessed your thing. I guessed your thing exactly. However, I thought it sounded absolutely ridiculous at the same time, and then changed my mind to Phil, which you could link everything together.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I went with Phil because it sounded more plausible. And it turns out I should have gone with the ridiculous, because that would have.
Yeah, you should have gone with ridiculous.
Yeah, I really should have.
So I chose locked room was the murder weapon.
Right.
And was it accident I chose?
No, that's what.
Locked room and
photograph was the other thing.
Oh, what was the?
It was a photograph.
Photograph, that was it. Yeah, locked room and photograph. Just completely threw them, because I was like, yeah, and then I think it was must have been Andy that chose it. Andy chose loss of valuables and something else that was left at the scene, and they were just like, Phil had so much stuff like jewelry, pendant, something else. It was like it seemed like him.
But he also had machinery,
and everyone was like, can't be a locked room. So that was it, machinery. Yeah. And he put an accident, didn't he?
And he put the cause of death as an accident in a storeroom. And storerooms tend to have things like balers and forklifts in and stuff like that. So it drew heavy towards.
I have an opinion formed in my head now that this is 50% Daryl picking something vague and 50% Andy not having the correct words to choose from to pick him out.
No.
It wasn't really. Like, Andy still had... Like, when we looked at it at the end, we saw that Andy did everything that he could. It made sense, the story that he was telling with Daryl's one, but it also made sense to link things with Phil to it as well. So as such,
yeah,
Daryl
I'm not saying he did a bad job. I'm saying that he didn't have the resources to specifically pick Daryl.
Yeah, perhaps that's true.
Because if they'd had like something to do, a locked room is a very vague thing.
It is, yeah. But at the same time, accident is the best you can really do with it, unless you were somehow going to tie suffocation to it. But I feel like that would be a long shot to suffocate someone in the room.
But in comparison to everything else that's on the field,
yeah, it was really tough. Like Daryl did make it hard for Andy, though. In fairness, by picking what he did. But what was curious is, Daryl, you could have actually made that one harder, because you could have had all three of us trapped in that one, because I think all of us had something to do with drugging someone as our weapon.
Yeah.
And that would have, because if anything, I think I had something in my murder weapons as well that could have been seen as something you could kill with accidentally. But it was really flimsy, whereas there was a weapon on the board for all three of us, which would have tied us all to, I think it was either poisoning or a suffocation. I think it was a poisoning, actually. You could have tied all three of us to it and made it really, really hard. But
yeah, I think it was... Did I have injection or something like that at one point?
I think so, yeah. I think you might have had injection. I might have had illegal drug, and...
That was it, illegal drug.
I've forgotten what Phil had, but I know there was...
Oh, I had powdered drug.
Yeah,
Someone
maybe.
had powdered drug.
Yeah,
Mm.
but there was definitely stuff in there to be able to tie all three of us to it. But it turned out that it was enough just to have two people tied to this thing. It made it really, really hard to be able to distinguish between the two. So you did really well with that.
It's a really good game. I'd love to play it like live.
I will
real
say,
life.
just for the sake of showing me up as an idiot as well, I did exactly what the guys did in our game, the original game we had of Deception Murder in Hong Kong. I completely discounted a clue that was on the board, which literally would have given the thing away. And because I was so unfocused on it, it felt like it drew everyone else from the group away from it as well. Essentially, the clue was synthetic, and it was supposed to draw us to the clue wig, which makes
the wig,
perfect sense. I was going to say the electrical thing, the electrical current. Phil did admit in that case that an electrical current is variable because one of the clues he had to give was the duration it took for the person to die.
Yeah.
Instant. And my argument was that it would be brief. And Phil did kind of say, yeah, currents vary. It wouldn't be instant in all cases. You could make the argument that a cardiac arrest is not instant. It is a brief thing.
Yeah.
But you know, that was simply something that was down to two different interpretations of it. Because the cause of death was like severe injury, which I usually take as being something more like a bludgeoning or something like that, or a gunshot or something like that would be a severe injury. The way that I see it, but at the same time, I can't see where you can go with electrical current as the murder weapon, which it was. But yeah, it's just interesting because it's like I said, that one was completely my fault because regardless of whether I was right or wrong about the electrical current, I was so dead wrong about the clue because I didn't make the link between synthetic and wig, which in hindsight should have been a given. Like, but that's what's cool about this game.
It feels very interesting because a lot of the times it's like a bit similar to like Mysterium, I suppose. Mysterium Park, sorry, where you're trying to let them win. You're trying to get them to win, but at the same time, you're stuck with what you're dealt with.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it can be very abstract, which I really like. I really like because it's a discussion game again.
Yeah.
Although, interestingly enough, none of us use our 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
We sort of talk, but none of us use our 30 seconds to kind of okay, right, I need my 30 seconds. I think blah 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 blah.
I think it's because we play with quite a passive group in general, so that 30-second rule is really there for if two people are really getting at loggerheads with one another, and it gives that option for one person then to go, I want my 30 seconds, basically, so they can speak without being spoken over. That's what that's there for, and I think it's a really good tool to put in there.
It's ideal, isn't it? Because you can't. It doesn't happen with our game group, but it's not unheard of to say, have someone try and explain why someone else is guilty, and that person's tactic is to just yell over them so no one else hears what the issue is.
Yeah, exactly.
And it does work.
And it gives a good stopping point of, okay, everyone's had their 30 seconds now, so we move on to the next round. As soon as those 30 seconds are up, we just move on if everyone's arguing over one another. Whereas, like, say, although it's not in the rules in R1, we just all forfeit our 30 seconds and then move on to the next round. I mean, it's a simple enough thing to go around, really. But really good game. Really loved it. The second thing we played on Zoom, which I'll get onto though, we did try playing Treasure Island on Tabletop Simulator and abandoned it after trying for about 20 minutes. It's
such a shame.
Yeah, it brings up one of the things which I actually mostly wanted to talk about here because the game we played in Tabletopia was the crew, and we've talked about the crew enough on this podcast that I don't feel like we have to play it again. It was a really good game. We really enjoyed it. We still really enjoy it, and I think that's about enough to say about the crew, really. I wanted to talk more about differences between Tabletopia and Board Game Simulator, because Board Game Simulator is increasingly becoming a point of frustration for me. I'm now convinced that it's not a good tool for playing board games. If anything, it only works well for simpler games. And the difference between Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia is that Tabletop Simulator is a board game sandbox, whereas Tabletopia is a board game emulator. So what that means is I sometimes find the problems with Tabletop Simulator is, and I'm not here to say I don't like fun, But a lot of people can get a bit carried away with Tabletop Simulator. They will say make parts bigger. They will flip parts across the board. You will lose it, and if just one person is doing that and everyone else is trying to play the game, it can ruin the entire thing and make the game unplayable. That's on top of it happening, but it's on top of it happening accidentally as well. Like, I think the first problem we had when we were setting up Treasure Island was the fact that Phil lost a part almost immediately, or a part snapped to a and would not move.
He lost his ability to. He couldn't do any of the functions, which made no sense.
That's what happened.
Even
later.
when we exited.
That's what happened later. Because remember, first of all,
Did he lose a part as well?
Yeah, he either lost a part or a part got snapped to a position and we couldn't figure out how to unlock it. And so he moved to another player. Then when he moved to another player, he couldn't do one of the functions within the game. So we tried quitting out and starting a new game, and he was still having the same problem. And it's just, it can go all over the place. I mean, even games we have successfully played before, we've still had issues. Like, I remember when we played Rallyman GT in Board Game Simulator, and we had to sub out parts for another part because, again, I think it was one of Phil or Andy, again, lost their part midway through the game, so we had to just use another part to represent one of their cards.
It flew off the table.
So Tabletopia has more restricted rules to it. You can't do as much in Tabletopia compared to Board Game Simulator. And I think that actually works to its benefit. And although we first of all struggled to do something as simple as put all our cards back into a stack, once we figured that out, I feel like that's the only problem we actually had during that game, because it restricts you to only being able to do things like deal the cards, shuffle the cards, take a card, put a card back, and stuff like that. It really restricts you, and it means that you can have a bit more of a board game experience without one person potentially spoiling things for everyone else, I feel. I don't know how you feel about it, Daryl, but I felt as if
it's annoying because
I still don't think it was that stable, but it was more stable than Board Game Simulator.
I think my issue was when before you guys had got into the game on Treasure Island. Have you played Treasure Island, Ian?
No.
Okay, so before I got into it and started setting it up, it worked really well. Like, they'd thought about everything, like how to measure the units, distance, how to sort of do the. They've like scripted it so when you move your character, it draws a line for you. You've got all your little mini bases. Everything worked really well, and then because it started breaking down, it got really annoying because the game itself initially seemed like a really good True 2 version, where you could kind of, do you know what, we could actually play this quite well because all the tokens were in their own places. The setup was quite minimal. Like I say, some of the scripted parts really helped. And then like Phil couldn't do something, and then an error kept coming up for someone. I think it was Phil still, and it wasn't enjoyable. Like resetting it didn't work, and you just kind of go, because the real game's great, and like it's just it was emulated to an extent, but it wasn't emulated fully because obviously the markers, the drawing is.
So this is kind of like one of the things I was saying. When you were learning how to play it and stuff and trying it on Tabletop Simulator, you were making a conceited effort to try and learn all the systems and things like that. And I will say, I did this as soon as I got in the room as well, knowing that you'd said you kind of knew how to play it. And I imagined this is exactly what Andy and Phil did as well. We started clicking on everything. Like moving things about, clicking on everything, moving things about.
Yeah, of course.
And that will disrupt things. And this is where, in a way, sometimes Tabletop Simulator kind of falls down. And I think it's largely because it's almost because you're given so much freedom to do whatever the hell you want in Tabletop Simulator.
I think it's
kind of
it's ideal, isn't it, for the really simple thing. So I know when we played Bang, that was ideal.
Yeah. It didn't need much, did it?
I remember playing Bang and thinking, with what's going on with Bang, what we're doing on the screen, that this is perfectly bearable and this is fun. But God, I would not want to put an entire full-scale Warhammer 40k army and play on Tabletop Simulator like some people do.
Yeah.
I just thought moving individual models as a group into cover and changing their locations, and I just wouldn't want to do that.
So, just to give another brief insight into Tabletopia, because I think we've gotten across what Tabletop Simulator is. Tabletopia is a little bit different. It's a website that you go to and you sign up, and you can play all the games, through your browser, basically. So it doesn't require any purchase of anything or anything like that. There is a whole lot less on Tabletopia. It seems like it's more of a place for board game designers to go and upload their game to it, rather than leaving a sandbox open for people to make their own stuff to put on it. And it does mean that you get a bit of a more polished product. And I'm not going to say that everything's perfect. I did start a game of one thing, and I couldn't get it working at all. So it's not perfect by any means at all. You are a little more limited with the amount of games that are available on there. Plus, also, some of it is locked behind a paywall as well. So I know definitely Wingspan, for example, is a premium game on there. So you have to have the pro account in order to be able to play it. You're also limited to only being involved in 2 games at a time. So one of the really cool things about Tabletopia is, and you can do this with Tabletop Simulator as well, is you can save your position in a game. So if you decide to wrap it up for a night, you can go back to Tabletopia or log in and carry on with your game. But you can only have 2 concurrently running games at one time. So if you want to start another one, you have to sacrifice one of your other games, basically. But it's completely free, and it's not that you only get basic games with a free account. You get plenty of games that are available. Like I said, we played The Crew. That was done on a free account, and The Crew is a brilliant game. I still feel like we need to judge Tabletopia a little bit more, though, based on a more complex game, perhaps, that we would play on there.
I was going to say, the
yeah,
Crew,
I think there's a few more options.
I think The Crew would play just as well on Tabletop Sim as...
It would.
Yeah. War game sim, sorry, yeah.
But it'll just...
It's a simple game with simple assets. It's once you start getting complicated games with large boards, multiple like meeples or tiles or things like that, you need to address. Then it starts getting confusing. And I do wonder in what aspects game developers would benefit from having specific game engines made for their specific games. And I know that's not the ideal, but stuff like Carcassonne being out on the Switch, I wonder whether this highlights a need for more widely introducing your board game via a digital market, whether specifically creating that game, like Carcassonne, like Monopoly, but like stuff where they've got their you can get their games on Switch or on PC and things like that, and you can play it with people. Having its own engine means that it's going to run better than having an engine for everything, and then just trying to slide it in where it fits, and then suddenly there's a lantern on the table that's 5 times the size and it's knocking all the counters off the table.
I think this is why I'd be quite interested to see what happens in Tabletopia when you play a larger game, simply because if anything, from a player's perspective, it's going to be interesting to see what players are going to start doing when they start feeling a bit bored or agitated or something like that. It will be interesting to see what will happen.
We'll put it through the Andrew test
yeah,
of leaving Andy with it for 5 minutes before he gets wound up, and see if he increases its size by 5 times, or whether he just starts throwing items across the table.
But yeah, that's, like I say, that'll be interesting. Hopefully we'll get to play Tabletopia a bit more in the coming weeks, and we'll be able to report on it a bit more. But moving on, there's just one last thing that I want to talk about real quickly, and that is that we had another session with... Well, I had another session with the Samurai Slasher game that I've talked about before, that Mike Garley has talked about with us before. It was interesting, because basically Samurai Slasher is a drinking game, one versus all game where one person takes the role of a slasher and everyone else play survivors. It's a real simple kind of pseudo RPG where you have a script that you run your players through, which is separated out by attack sequences, which are then defined by dice rolls, basically. He wanted me to play as the slasher this time, so I was playing the one versus all, so he would play as the as a survivor in it. It was done to see how someone who didn't create the system would play as the slasher. he only gave me 20 minutes to read the rules to be able to jump in and start playing as the slasher. And in fairness, the rules are quite simple. But it was really interesting being on that side of things because there were a couple of things that weren't explained fully. So Mike was taking that from the game and then saying, right, I might change this next time. So it's not a finished game. You're not going to find this anywhere. But I have talked about it before. So I've given an explanation about how the game plays before. It's interesting being on the other side of things because as you do treat it as if you were in an RPG, although it is a one versus all game. There's no fun in eliminating one of the people that's playing early in the game because they're just going to be sat around doing nothing. So the person that's playing the slasher does have to have a measure of restraint. And in fact, I managed to get it so that I still had all 3 survivors at the end, but all 3 of them were in critical condition and basically on the verge of dying. That was my plan all along, was to try and distribute the damage rather than kill people quickly. Because I wanted it just to have that dramatic tension. You could easily still have someone, though, that picks on one person. And Mike actually did say that if you're playing with someone that is starting to piss you off, there's nothing wrong with starting to pick on them. As if to say, like, okay, turn it back a bit and maybe I'll stop attacking you, kind of thing. But it worked out really well because one of the complaints we had when we played it the first time was that it was too easy for the survivors. Essentially, the survivors, if you had a maniac on your team that didn't care about how much he was drinking, you can drink to modify your results. And if that person just decided, I'm just going to keep drinking so that the samurai slasher just won't be able to keep up or something.
Where can I buy this game?
I think his Twitter account was at Mike Garley. It's worth giving that a follow. If it's something different, I'll put it up on screen now. But basically, there were a lot of problems where the samurai slasher, it was actually borderline dangerous because the samurai slasher, like I said, if you had that scenario where one of the survivors kept on drinking, the samurai slasher, to keep up, would have to keep drinking, except he's not doing it for one person.
Wow.
He's doing it for everyone around the table. So this was adjusted so that the survivors are given one opportunity to drink, and then the slasher can drink to even it out, and then it's done. The survivors don't get any chance to respond to it. It used to be that the samurai would drink first, and then the survivors would drink second, which again didn't really work. So a few of the things have ironed out, so I wasn't completely dead by the end of it. I still drank quite a lot, but wasn't too bad by the end of it.
I would have liked to play as the slasher where you're constantly drinking to keep up with 3 people. It might even the odds.
Yeah, but essentially it ended with 2 people that were literally one hit away from dying, and the third person did die in it. So any good horror movie is going to have victims in it. So it actually worked out really well. It felt far more balanced, and he's working on it. It still needs a little bit more work done to it, which he did say towards the end of the game, so it is still going to change a little bit more. But it's
work in progress, isn't it?
It's a work in progress. So by all means, keep an eye on at Mike Garley on Twitter, or whatever's put on screen if I've got that wrong. Okay. I think it's time to move on to some news then.
News.
Okay, so the first thing I would like to talk about here is the UK Game Expo going ahead, but with new dates. Now, this is a real dodgy issue, because obviously a big board gaming convention going on whilst we're still in the middle of a pandemic is not great. And yes, there's a vaccine going around and stuff. I think we might have talked about this briefly on one of the other podcasts, maybe. I can't remember whether we talked about it privately. But essentially, it's now been moved to end of July, early August. So starting the Friday the 30th of July until Sunday the 1st of August. They're claiming they have 2 plans in place, depending on what the situation is with the pandemic at the time. But they've only revealed what one is. I can only guess that the one they haven't announced is another virtual convention, like they did last year. They've said they've moved it back by 8 weeks to give them more chance of doing a physical show. It's debatable as to whether that is wise or not, because I know there's been bit of arguing on Twitter over whether this is acceptable or not. Everyone isn't going to be vaccinated by that time. That, I feel, is the main issue here. And unless everyone attending is vaccinated, I don't feel as if they can let people in.
How are they going to organise this? Because are they going to specifically stop people who haven't been vaccinated from attending, or...?
They haven't actually said. They're still saying that, essentially, if I read off of their website what their plan currently is, so this is everything we know at the moment, for their plan A, basically. They've said, we are planning for 2 possible forms of show: a normal show with as many of the features as you expect to see at a UK Game Expo, or a socially distanced event. This would include steps to make demos, tournaments, and live shows distant, wider aisles in the trade halls, and reduced daily ticket numbers to keep everyone safe. So, I would say, regardless of how you socially distance things, demo tables are calling for...
You're touching everything.
You're touching everything.
And so is everybody else. Unless... no, I can't see this being...
Gloves? It's gonna be...
Gloves are meaningless, because all that happens is if you're wearing gloves, you don't wash your hands as much, and you transfer everything you touch. You might not be touching...
No, I mean, like,
as soon as you
as in they give out a glove.
Something like that whilst you're wearing the gloves have done nothing. That's the thing.
No, I meant, like, each demo they give out... Like a glove.
But
each demo gives out gloves rather than you wear them all throughout the day.
Let's say that we're playing with gloves on, and just literally accidentally, I just go...
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Like I flat out do that. Like I have to physically stop myself doing that when I'm at work. I flat out. I just constantly go, or I'll go. You would have, people watching this podcast would have seen me touch my face roughly 9 to 10 times in the last half an hour. Yeah. It's a tick. I just do it nervously, or I do that.
I don't even notice.
Scratch my beard.
If I'm honest.
Same.
If someone was to say to me, "Did you just touch your face?" My honest response would be, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I don't know. Probably. My answer would be probably.
Yeah.
Exactly. When I'm at work, I don't. I'm wearing a mask, and I make an active thought process to not touch things. I know that sounds weird, but it's such a natural part of a human being to just go. But, I mean, you got an itch on your eye. You go like that, and that's as much as it takes. And with that many people in one location touching all the same things, it's kind of like, it's one of these things as well where I honestly think wider aisles and reduced tickets amounts doesn't necessarily do enough. I feel like making sure that everyone going in is vaccinated is more important than that. But it's shoveling whilst it's still snowing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yes, you're making a dent, but really, it's still going to snow over it. It's the vaccination is going to be the real ticket here, and I think if they can implement something where they can ensure that everyone's been vaccinated, they might be able to do it, but it's still going to be difficult.
That's going to be very hard, isn't it? Because not everyone's going to want to do it.
Bearing in mind we're looking at August, so we got 6 months, but we all know from the last time that six months is meaningless almost. Like it can go down and come back in that space of time.
I mean, it's something to keep an eye on, really. I mean, they're not saying they're definitely going ahead with it. I think I've only just noticed they did actually mention both options that they've got there. A full form of its show is a dream, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I'm actually surprised to read that. I really thought their 2 options were a socially distanced event or a virtual event. They're talking about a fully contact event and a socially distanced event, which I think that's Dream Street, if I'm perfectly honest. I really do think it is. Doing a full event this year, I think is... No, I think you're talking, even with mass rollout for vaccination, you're still talking about a socially distanced event, which would be the second option, but we can only see what they do. I know that they have argued that this is their only chance of being able to run an event this year, and that the dates aren't available if they don't try to set them for that time. So I know that is their stance on it. Okay, is there anything else you guys wanted to say about that one?
I think it's fairly self-explanatory, isn't it? We all know the state of the world, and we'll all have different opinions of whether it's a good idea.
The next one, I'll just go over really, really briefly because there's not a lot of details out about this at the moment. But you guys all know Stone Mayer Games. They're the guys that do Scythe and Wingspan and Pendulum and all of those games that are really, really big hits with the fans.
Everyone.
Look at Steve trying to worm his way through this game. Oh, it's really good games in their fans' opinions.
I love Scythe. I think Scythe is great. But yeah, they've made their first big announcement for their first big game of the year, and that is Red Rising, which it looks really interesting. It's actually based on a dystopian novel. A novel about a dystopian society, should I say. That's probably a better way of saying it. It's a book series by Pierce Brown. And as you'd expect, the artwork that has been released for this looks great. Also, it's advertising that it will be running the Automa Factory solo play mode, which I'm not a big fan of. I really don't like it where it's been used in Scythe and Wingspan and stuff like that. Just not a fan of the solo version of it. But yeah, this looks quite interesting. It is a card drafting game, but it kind of looks like it's going to play a little bit like Gugong, funnily enough. Because it mentions that you're going to be drafting cards in the game, but you're also going to be using your cards to place on locations to trigger activities and stuff like that. You're also going to be able to remove cards from the location to put into your own hand that other people have already played on there. So there are kind of similarities here between this and Gugong. It'll be interesting to see where they go with it, because it's going to be available directly from Stone Mayer Games in either March or April 2021. So it's on its way real soon, but there's just not a lot of pictures of it. If you go onto its Board Game Geek site, you can actually see a few pictures of it, but as such, don't know too much more about this one at the moment. But Stone Mayer Games are kind of an event for board gamers, pretty much. So yeah, this is one to keep an eye on there, but don't want to say too much more on it because I don't know much more on it. Next
Fair
up,
enough.
I believe I'm going to hand over to you guys here because you are going to talk about some Fantasy Flight releases.
Yeah, there's been multiple expansions announced for Star Wars, X-Wing Armada, and Legion. So I think Armada is the one I'm going to start with because we've seen exactly what the models are, and are available for pre-order on Entoyment's website, as I've already pre-ordered because I want them.
I will put links to Entoyment down below.
Yeah, there's a Venator class Star Destroyer from the Clone Wars, along with the Pelter class frigate, which is like almost looks a little bit like the Corellian Corvette to some degree. It's got like Corellian Corvette vibes, isn't it? It's got that like rounded front. And then there's two Separatist ships, so the Invisible Hand, which is I think Grievous's capital ship, isn't it? And then the Recusant class Destroyer as well, which is another Separatist ship. They all look very cool, and I think it has instilled some need for us to play Armada, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the base game somewhat punched cards done, but I do need to go through the rules. I just felt like it'd be another kind of X-Wing type system, which would be good.
It's a delayed system, isn't it? Because it's like
you build up.
Make an action and it happens in like 3 turns time. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've been waiting for the Clone Wars ships personally to start playing it.
I think the thing I'm most going to enjoy is the big battle, small battle kind of side thing. Because obviously with X-Wing, we found it quite tedious to do a mass scale battle. Whereas with this, each like little set of squads is like 5 or 6 TIEs or X-Wings or whatever. So moving them around is going to be sweet. And they're still going to have the same kind of level. Also, they're bringing out new X-Wing stuff, which I'm quite a fan of these new squadron packs.
I would say that it's not new X-Wing models, but it is new X-Wing content.
Yeah, it's nice because started doing it was with the clones and the separatists. They brought out the triple packs where you got like a sort of a leader and then 2 extra staff. So they're kind of continuing on with that, which is kind of cool. So you're getting like TIE fighters.
I think it's TIE. It's interceptors with a TIE defender. You've got a B-wing with 2 A-wings. So the B-wing is Harrison Dula. You've got Kanan Jarrus in. I can't remember what class of ship the Moldy Crow was.
It just says so. You get Y-wings for the scum and villainy, and then just a vessel, but it doesn't say what. Yeah,
so it's one of the. It's like the Hawk. It's the Hawk. So you get. Yeah, and then you've got Gideon Husk with. He's in the Defender, isn't he? With 2. I'm pretty sure it's 2 times.
So I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be interesting because it's one of those things where it's like an entry pack into Star Wars, which I kind of enjoyed with the whole Clone Wars ones, because you get like enough to just run. In my opinion, 3 ships is pretty much a good entry point into Star Wars. Anything more than that gets a bit too extreme, and this is a bit more of a quick game. So it's a nice little selection. Plus, it's kind of named characters. It's bringing back models. Might be slightly different paintworks on them, which is kind of nice.
It's almost like Ace paint patterns, isn't it? So the TIE Defender,
exactly, the
Husk is like a bit of yellow on it and stuff. So
which would be really, really cool. But the other thing I'm most interested in is they're bringing 2 new vehicles to Legion, which is kind of interesting. So they've got this kind of for the Rebel one, you've got a AA5 speeder truck, which looks really cool, like a tank type thing.
Yeah.
So it's an armored transport. It's got 2 weapons, modular hulls, opening doors. I like that. I like the fact that you might be able to put figures in it. I like the idea that you'll be able to sort of travel around with them, and they'll have weapons and stuff like that. But the other one, which I'm kind of interested in more,
I mean, I'm very interested in.
The LAAT/LE patrol transport ship, which is kind of like they were like the police force, weren't they, in Clone Wars? So in this version, you can actually use them as either Republic or Imperials, and they're just a cool like little ship. They kind of look like the start of a TIE fighter type thing, but not like with the cockpit type thing. But again, it's probably currently the only other flying vehicle. At the moment, you've only got the Rebel Snowspeeder type thing. So there's not been anything really kind of, mostly ground assault vehicles. It'd be nice to see another kind of flight-based thing, because I'd like to see that.
It doesn't it appear in one of the latest Star Wars films? No, I'm thinking of Rebels. It appears in Rebels, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what they keep like appearing in, don't they? When they're like flying around the fold and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just got like it's like a police ship almost.
Yeah, it's like like not a gunship, but like a police helicopter, I guess.
Basically, yeah. Again, it's got 2 pilots, pilot options, and modular opening. So I think that's gonna be cool again, because it might be nice to, if these vehicles can actually like open and close, it'd be nice to display figures in them.
Ever so slightly devastated to find out that it's not the actual Lark gunship. Like the proper Clone Wars.
I think the scale would be too.
It'd be ridiculous. I'd love it.
Too big. You're just running around in that, and it's like everyone else is just a vehicle, a small little figure on the floor.
You can get them in the same scale, which is nice.
Yeah.
But they obviously don't have rules, but it'd be cool for terrain or like a objective point.
Yeah, I guess if it was like on the floor and you had to get to it, that'd be quite nice. Which would be, I mean, I've seen some people make them as like objective things. They are quite cool.
I would describe them as iconic.
100%. But then where do you stop? Do you get the one that's carrying the little crawler? Do you know what I mean? Like you're gonna have to.
If I don't get an ATTE for my clones, someone at Fantasy Flight is smoking crack, because I'd pay hundreds of pounds for that. Just would. Stop smoking crack. Stop smoking.
That's our advice to Fantasy Flight this week.
Stop smoking crack and give me my giant walker, and then what happens? Andy's got his little separatist tank. No, giant rhino walker that climbs up walls.
A separatist tank that can be held off by a punching stormtrooper.
Yeah, that was amazing.
It couldn't
What-
even
what
kill
game?
one man. Could not even kill one man. I'm just
Look,
punching it, constantly
tank,
punching it.
tanks aren't built for close combat, but all I'm saying is that if I get the
Clearly
ATTE and
not.
I'm not allowed to stomp on one of your boys, you're smoking crack, Fantasy Fight.
I need to repaint that figure as like some sort of like I might give him like a cape and stuff, like a Rocky Balboa-esque looking kind of cape and a crown. That
Just
dude was
get one of the
MVP.
little capes from like the Lego Star Wars figures and just wrap it
Oh,
around him.
what? Just wrap it around him. Yeah.
That'll do.
Paint his fist red. Oh.
That's not paint. It's just on repeated. In Clone Wars, that in like one of the first episodes, there's a clone that rushes a droid to fight him hand in hand and punches the droid in the face and goes, ah! Perfect.
Okay. Shall we move on then? We've got one last news story really to look at here, which I will link in the comments down below. But we have another board game related Humble Bundle to tell you guys about. So we've done a couple of these before, and this one, I think at the time this goes out, there'll still be about another 5 days on it. So it'll still be available for you to go and look at here. So yeah, links down below. It's an Asmodee Humble Bundle. So the sort of games you'll be looking at on here is you have Pandemic on the Brink. You have Small World, including the Grand Dames expansion. You have the regular Pandemic game, Love Letter, various versions of Ticket to Ride, Splendor, as well as some of the expansions for that. The Game of 30% coupon off of the Game of Thrones board game. That's a cheeky one. Terraforming Mars, Blood Rage, the Lord of the Rings adventure card game, and more Ticket to Ride and Small World. So there's quite a few things there that are interesting to know. I can talk basically about the Splendor and Pandemic ones. They're both really good versions of it. They're worth checking out. I think I have Love Letter as well. You can't really get Love Letter wrong though. Small World should be interesting. That's another big game. If you're after Ticket to Ride, good God, you will be satisfied for a long time.
Every single country, well, not every single country, but quite close.
Yeah, but the ones which are really jumping out to me here is Terraforming Mars, Blood Rage, and Lord of the Rings, which unfortunately is the higher tiered ones. You're talking £7.32, which is still incredibly cheap.
That's an absolute steal, yeah.
All of these games, including a whole bunch of expansions, it's really, really a worthwhile deal here. But Blood Rage is a game that I've been meaning to try to buy for a while now. Having a digital version, I've heard the digital version isn't great, but I'd still like it to give it a try. It's like a £70 board game, so
oh wow, shit.
Getting it for £7.32 for a digital version to give it a go to see whether I'd like it or not is not such a bad way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it might work really well.
But I mean, like the Lord of the Rings adventure card game, that's not Journeys Through Middle Earth, I don't think. That's
no, it's the old
living card game.
It's a living card game, yeah.
Okay, I'm maybe not quite as interested in that one. I don't think, just because I've got.
Depends if it's all the if it's.
I mean, I'd be tempted for Terraforming
Yeah,
Mars.
if it's all of the stuff.
Yeah.
Because how much more is it than the last one? Like 20p.
So £7.32 gets you Terraforming Mars, Blood Rage, Lord of the Rings, then the Cursed expansion for Small World, and Ticket to Ride Europe.
But what I'm saying is, you've got the 73p for the first one, which is great. That's ridiculous. And then £7.09 you get all the Ticket to Ride stuff and Splendor, and a bit more stuff for Pandemic and Small World and Game of Thrones. At that point, if you're paying that much, you might as well spend the extra 20p and get Blood Rage, Lord of the Rings, Terraforming Mars, more Small World, and more Ticket to Ride.
Definitely. You see, the unfortunate thing for me is I already own a handful of these games. I mean, there's no reason why I couldn't buy it and then gift some of them to someone else. No reason why I couldn't do that at all. And then I've got more people to play these games with. But going back to something we were talking about earlier as well, about Board Game Simulator and stuff like that, I found that generally the dedicated stuff is so much better. It's more expensive, but you're getting a purpose-built thing for these that you can't really screw up. You know, it's specifically scripted to that game as well. You're not talking about tools that are available for making every kind of game. You're talking about a set of tools that have been made specifically for making one game. It means it's always going to be better. Yeah. It's better presented as well. I'm just a little sad that they haven't got Mysterium on this one, because I would have liked to have bought that pack and then gifted Mysterium to someone so I would have someone to play that with. But yeah, 73 pence even just for the base thing. That is ridiculously good value though.
Yeah, Pandemic and Love Letter, I mean, just 73 pence just to have a really good working version of Love Letter to screw around with is pretty good going, you know? But yeah, that's it. That's the Humble Bundle there. I'm still tempted to get it, even though I do own quite a few of these bits. Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
I'll see with this one, because I think I bought the bundle last time and they tend to repeat the games.
There was one I wish I got. I think you sent it to us ages ago. And did they have Scythe on there and some other
Yeah, I've got Scythe.
Some sort of more harder games, I guess you could. Yeah.
But anyway,
I would like to have a go at them.
I
apologise for my chair creaking all the time, by the way. It's a very old girl.
To be honest, I've got like I don't know whether it's been showing up at all, but my neighbours are currently having work done on their garden.
No.
I don't know whether it's.
Haven't heard it for a second.
That is perfect. I'm
no, not heard it at
all. But yeah, I think we are done with that. We have no audience questions again this week. We have changed our email address for that. If you would like to ask us a question for future podcasts that we will answer on show, send them to everybodydiceshow@gmail.com. I will put that link in the description down below as well. Please send us questions. Doesn't even have to be about board games. We'll just have a bit of fun with that segment if we ever get to do it again. But anyway, let's move on to our big topic.
Hey.
How big is it in centimeters?
I don't know. It's not really a physical.
We talking.
Do you not quantify it?
A physical object,
that big?
really. It's
corner to corner big.
I mean, why not? Yeah, let's just quantify it.
Is it bigger round, or is it like?
Is it
Does it
long?
have to be in a straight.
Or is it girthy
Yeah, or
too?
is it like really girthy? A girthy topic.
Are we talking big chongus? Is it a chode?
The chode.
Oh dear, it's devolved into chaos. Good God.
I have.
Help
Remind
me
me to send you a video later about the chode thing. That reminded me of something. Carry on.
I don't want to watch it.
It's not that. It's not that.
I don't want to watch it.
That word comes up and it just cracked me up.
Oh God.
I don't want to watch it.
Anyway,
find it.
Our big topic is chosen every single time by our wonderful patrons that basically gather over at patreon.com/everybodydice, where for as little as $1 a month you can help choose the topic we talk about at the end of this podcast. You also get access to a couple of other things as well that we'll explain towards the end of the video. But this month, I do this every time. I swear I'm breaking.
He's broken.
But essentially the three options they had this time around were, can board gaming terminology have an adverse effect on new gamers? Wonder where I got the idea from that topic from.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on emulators such as Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia?
Oh!
Wonder where I got that one from.
Very convenient.
But the one which won out is, would you ever consider making an Everybody Dice board game?
Can we just do a weird one we've never done before? Can we just do a very quick yes or no to the answers for the other two?
What I think's really interesting about the other two is that Steve gave them the option for us to talk about it, and then when they said no, like, well, we'll talk about it anyway.
Let's steal the podcast.
You're ungrateful. We're in control here.
In a way, I would have been more worried if they'd chosen either of the other two, because the others kind of like played into things that have already happened on what we've been playing. This is the only one that doesn't, so in a way, it would have been really awkward if we'd gotten to that and then had to talk about it twice in the same
Just said
podcast.
yes.
So, in a
Yes.
way, great job, Patreon.
Yeah, all right.
Like, you did well.
We'll let you off this time.
This time. Okay.
So, yeah, would you ever consider making an Everybody Dies board game? I don't.
In what way?
We used to do as a joke. So we always used to do as a joke on here that we make a game. I think using Everybody Dice as a vehicle to make a board game would be kind of cool. To make one centered around Everybody Dice, heck no. What the hell do we do it on? Like,
how would that work? How would that work?
Do we tie
Ian paints another miniature. Roll the dice. He paints it well.
I was thinking more along the lines of taking things that we've talked about on the podcast, maybe, and just conceptualizing it in a game of some sort. And then I was thinking the kind of things we've talked about on this podcast would be horrible. Like, what have we talked about before?
What if?
We talked about
Can you eat the elderly?
Can you eat the elderly? Like constant
Yes.
And pee on Theresa May.
Things like that.
The answer is yes. I can and I will eat the elderly. Now's the time.
I mean, as a joke, we always used to do the section on this podcast of we make a game, which worked. Which I think we really dropped that because it started not making sense, especially when we weren't all in the same room together. It didn't feel like something that really would flow very well over the internet when we do our podcasts. And we've had ideas in a
podcast.
A podcast-related board game.
I think so. I would, and there's a couple I'd still like to fit. Yeah, so if it was us having to do a podcast and you had to make topics, so it'd be like a Jackbox TV game in a way, where you choose topics and put them together and then have to act out. That's the only way I can see it working of doing a podcast. Sorry, a game about Everybody Dies podcast.
So in other words,
do you know what I mean? Like, so you shuffle the deck.
Like Fun Employed or something like that, and you have to create a topic.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that would.
And I suppose
that would work. That would work. You blind.
Everyone else could have a card that they.
You blind pick cards.
Everyone else could have a card.
Yeah, of course. Audience participation.
I'm going to interject here and throw in this random comment that everyone else then has to work with and and stuff like that. But
yeah, that would work really well. That would work really well.
Steve cards, which are legitimate point-winning topics.
Yeah.
Daryl cards, which extend the length of the Steve topics, and Ian cards, which completely derail what you're talking about.
Yeah. It'd be great. You could literally.
You could someone could play a Steve card followed by a Daryl card, which extends into a Steve card and then two Daryl cards, and someone could ruin the whole thing by playing an Ian card in the middle, and you get no points.
I would play that game.
It's a fun little idea.
It's a great game.
I do play that game all the time. Just
real life.
I feel like to do that though, I think we would automatically get criticisms of this game is way too much like Fun Employed. Or something like that. I think that would be like this is Fun Employed with a new skin, basically, which would probably.
Yeah, I feel like
there are too many Ian cards. It's impossible to get points. He just constantly
expansion.
He interjects constantly and talks rubbish.
Oh, we've got the guest expansion where you can add in extra characters which you don't have as many cards of. So like, so we've had Andy, Leon, and Ree on this.
You can play a Ree card, and it does nothing.
It does nothing. Do you know what? I think that's a great concept. Just as a stupid podcasty game, I think.
I like the idea
or something like that. Then great.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's perfect. The idea that when you play your Steve card, you have to roll a large number of dice to see if it succeeds, and most of the time it doesn't. Things that should occur do not because the dice say they don't. Just to annoy Steve. Dice rolling when it needn't be dice rolling.
There we go. There's some extra mechanics to actually put a bit of variance into the game. What about if we approach this from a different angle and using Everybody Dice as a means to make other board games and stuff like that? So not necessarily an Everybody Dice podcast game, but maybe because it says, would you ever consider making an Everybody Dice board game? I suppose that leads more on the side of would Everybody Dice beat a game. And yeah, I think there's definitely an idea there, but I feel like
is my life a game to you?
I kind of feel like it's more, from what we were saying there, this is so much like so many other games that are out there that it feels like that would be a very gimmicky piece of kind of merchandise out there for people that would really want just a little thing, not like a serious board game that was going to be released into...
If this was enforced, I wouldn't take it seriously.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, even if we were talking about using Everybody Dice to publish board games that we thought of and stuff like that, I don't think I have it in me to be able to make a board game as such.
I don't have the attention span.
Yeah, I feel like one of the hardest things is putting yourself in the position of another gamer. So you're not playing games like they would play. Not playing games like you would play. You're playing games in the thought process of how someone else would play. How would someone else try and break the game? Like we've actually played board games where I would say Sean and Mike out of our game group are the two that look at them and say, "How can I break this game?"
Sean especially. Mike's not as bad. Mike,
I think Mike takes enjoy a game.
Yeah, if Mike's not feeling it, he will try and wreck it. But like Sean will go, "Oh, let's play." What was the game where you've got the dead people and you're having a party?
Dead Man's Cabal.
Oh, yeah,
Dead Man's Cabal. And Sean went, "I'm going to collect all the bones until there's no bones."
That was so bad.
And no one else can have any bones.
Yeah,
and it was just okay. Interesting take on the game. You'll lose and you'll make it hard for everyone else to enjoy, but good one.
It's one of those things where he looked at it and said, "Is there a limited amount of bones?" I think I looked it up, and it did say that there's a limited supply of bones. Once the bones are gone, that's it. No one else can take any. So I think a lot of board games get around it by saying you're not limited to the amount of tokens you've got on the board because they assume that someone is going to try and do that, just hoard and stop everyone else from doing things.
There were so many bones. He never finished it, did he?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, in some cases in games, you do want to put a limit on how many things are available around the board because it's basically a mechanic. There are other mechanics that may be skewed because of it. And it's all these things as to why I don't think I'd be very good at making a board game, because going through and meticulously finding every single system and how you can exploit every single one, I don't feel like I'd be very good at necessarily.
I mean, that's why you give it to people who are genuinely awful human beings like Mike and Sean, so that they can try and wreck your game, and then you can adapt it if you need
break the game in many ways as possible.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's kind of one of those things of I've always wanted to try to make a board game, but I don't know whether I would actually be any good at it. But like we've done this for hundreds of things now, where we've been able to put down like a base game for something, but they would quite frankly be an insult to professional board game makers in terms of there are obviously things that we put in these games because most of the time they're just jokey little things like that. Everybody dies.
Yeah, they're like
silly
little games.
Jokey little game. That's not a very serious board game. I feel as if we'd be terrible at something like that.
It'd be a great party game, I think.
Yeah. Just little party games. I think that would be our limit, is probably making a neat little party game. And in fact, I think most of the ones we made on these podcasts did feel more like little party game-ish kind of thing.
I think they were. I think they were always like a party game. Like, was it Cats versus Cucumbers or something?
That's the one I'd quite like.
Easily the best party game. Yeah.
But I feel like that's where I'd go. How about you guys? Would you consider making a board game?
I think, like you say,
I wouldn't want to. No.
I think it'd be too much. I think it'd be too much our thing, and not. It'd be something that like we would play, and only we would enjoy it. To the point where other people would play it and go, "I don't really get it. The rules are weird. What's the concept of this? Why has Ian got more cards?" Do you know what I mean? It's stuff like that. Like. But it would become something that there'd be too many weird rules we'd put in it that would only make sense to us, like in-joke rules, like, oh no, there's a Star Wars round, here we go, kind of thing. Like,
you may not play a Steve card in this round.
Yeah, 20 minutes of Star Wars games.
But one of the things we've never really talked about whenever we've covered this topic before is talking about this. This is even before you get into publishing and marketing, all of those things. Good God,
No,
I
don't envy people.
I have a hard enough time going on social media and advertising this podcast. You know, I genuinely don't like doing it.
I feel like I struggle to grasp the concept, I guess, of how difficult it must be for smaller companies, especially people like Peculiarity Games, so like Robbie Munn and stuff like that. How hard it must be for a smaller group to kind of get themselves out there. They've done a really fantastic job with the games, but do you know what I mean? I don't imagine as many people.
It's all very well for like some big companies who use Kickstarter to almost advertise their already burgeoning industry. Like they're already a big company and they don't need it, but they can just jump on Kickstarter and go, we're big, everyone will back this. And for smaller companies, it does make me wonder, you know, that it must be so difficult.
I mean, we do know
impossible.
We do know a person that is very good with Kickstarter and stuff like that. So that is one potential way of being able to getting into producing our own game or something like that. But at the same time, I would feel really bad about constantly asking them, hey,
piggybacking.
Yeah. Can you let me know a bit more about all this stuff, you know? But yeah, it's kind of like I think you guys tend to be far better on the design side of stuff as well than I am. I'm generally not quite so good about stuff like that.
I think this would be the thing, though. Each person would bring a strength to the table, wouldn't they? There'd be the design element. You would be very much the rules clarification and setting up the rules and stuff, because you've done so much of that anyway for games nights and for playing online or playing in real life. You're very rules savvy.
And I would be available to order dinner, grab drinks whilst we're discussing it.
Yeah, or you'd find you're very good at finding an exploit in the game. I would say you'd find a rule that you could. Hold on. Please let me finish. Okay. Please let me finish.
How dare
Zaya?
No.
Zaya,
no.
The rule of exploiting jumping between two systems repeatedly in order to fund your criminal empire or whatever.
How dare you?
I think a more polite way of putting it would be,
how dare you?
You're very good at finding the meta in games.
How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. Exploiting the rules.
I have never exploited any rules or done anything that would be considered metagamey. I'm not that guy. I don't know who you're thinking of, but that's not me.
But sorry, are we playing that game where it's never have I ever? Because you should be drinking like that now.
Okay.
How dare you?
So. All right. But anyway, my point was there's 3 different personalities we could bring to it, I guess.
Yeah.
If we were going down the route, I guess, like you say. Yeah. But I think it'd be very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing we can take away from this is there is a hell of a lot to making a board game. And to be honest, at the moment, I feel like we're at a comfortable point now with this, where we're releasing 1 video every week on here. We're trying to break, like I said before at the beginning of the podcast, I'm thinking about trying to start up kind of like Twitch streaming and stuff like that for certain board games. And at the moment, I can't make a promise about that because I don't know whether I have the time to be able to do that at the moment, because this isn't a profession for any of us. Like making a board game isn't a profession for any of us as well. So finding the time, it's a lot of time and effort to be able to go into these things. Coming up with an idea and being able to have a rough idea of how you want it to play is only really the first step in making a board game. There's so much more to it. And for that reason, I don't think I'd be good for doing it, I don't think. But yeah, I think that's the best way of putting it, really, is it's not as simple as coming up with an idea. There's a whole lot more to it. But anyway, with that, I think we are coming towards the end of the podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do remember to give it a like, share or subscribe. Any of the topics we've talked about today, if you've got any opinions on them, please do leave them in the comments down below, and we will get back to you on those. Apart from that, you can follow us on social medias if you'd like, at Everybody Dice for Twitter and at Everybody Dice Show for Instagram. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/everybodydice. That tends to be the best source for keeping up to date with what we've been doing, although we'll be using Twitter probably if we do start announcing things for Twitch and stuff like that, and we'll have all the details there. Yeah. Again, if you've really enjoyed what we do, we've got our Patreon page over at patreon.com/everybodydice. Like we said, you get to help shape the content for this very podcast, as well as what reviews we put out every single month as well. We're actually catching up now. We're very nearly on track again, with COVID having derailed a lot of it. Although I will say the game that's winning the vote at the moment is it's Spy Fest. That is a game that requires a lot of people to play, so we may not be able to play that for a long while, because at the moment I can't find an online app to be able to play it online at the moment. If anyone knows of one, please do link me down in the comments down below. Again, that would be massively helpful to us.
Holla at your boys.
Yeah. Apart from that, if you do sign up to the Patreon, you also get access to our audio newsletter as well, which we do every single month as well. Apart from that, thank you very much for joining us. There should be some videos somewhere on screen. I haven't really figured out where they're going to go on this one. Should be on screen right now somewhere. Please do give them a click as well, and we'll see you hopefully on the next podcast. Till next time, we can all wave if we want. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, baby.
Bye.